Imagine a woman in like a heavily corseted floor-length gown, gracefully navigating a drawing room to politely reject a suitor's advances.
Right, the classic costume drama scene.
Exactly. But then imagine her turning right around, marching into the kitchen, performing minor surgery on a farmhand, and then immediately whipping up a batch of artificial pearls from scratch.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that definitely breaks the cinematic illusion, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, it sounds like the plot of some bizarre steampunk novel. But in 1704, that wasn't fiction. That was simply the expectation for a, quote, useful woman.
It completely shatters that highly curated image we all have. You know, the fainting couches, sipping tea with the pinky extended.
Balancing a heavy book on your head to walk straight?
Yes, exactly. We tend to view historical women through this very specific lens of delicate, decorative passivity. But the reality, as you just pointed out, was this grueling, holistic boot camp of survival and management.
And that reality is exactly what we are plunging into today. Welcome to this deep dive. You, our listener, have sent us an absolutely incredible stack of primary sources.
They really are amazing.
Yeah, what you've handed us is essentially a time capsule. We have 3 highly detailed etiquette and education manuals spanning a century and a half. We've got a text from 1704, one from 1821, and a final one from 1833.
And our mission today is to use these 3 specific texts to trace a concept they constantly refer to as the path to usefulness.
The path to usefulness, right?
Yeah, we're going to decode what society truly expected from the ideal woman across this era. And it's far beyond just polite curtsies. We're looking at a really demanding integration of moral foundations, hardcore domestic economy, and deep religious principles.
It's essentially a rigorous curriculum of the mind, body, and soul. So to understand how a woman even begins to walk this path to usefulness, we kind of have to look at the baseline syllabus first.
Makes sense. Where do we start?
Let's open the oldest source in your stack, listener. This is from 1704. It's titled The Accomplished Female Instructor.
Oh, this one is fascinating. The book itself is split into 2 halves that frankly seem completely at odds with one another to a modern reader.
Yeah, the tonal shift is wild.
Right. So part 1 is very heavy on something the author calls generous breeding.
Okay, let's pause there for a second because generous breeding sounds like an agricultural term to me. What did that actually mean to someone living in 1704?
It's a great question because today we hear breeding and we just think of basic table manners, right?
Right, like keeping your elbows off the table.
Exactly. But in 1704, generous breeding was about cultivating a character worthy of noble lineage or a high societal duty. It wasn't just knowing which fork to use, it was the psychological fortitude to carry yourself with affability, courtesy, and humility, even under extreme stress.
Oh, wow. So it's much deeper than just etiquette.
Oh, absolutely. It includes chapters on finding contentment of mind, managing relentless suitors, and mastering eloquence.
Which they call witty raillery, right? I saw that phrase and loved it.
Yes, witty raillery, which is essentially high-level, charming banter. You had to be quick on your feet.
Okay, so part 1 is essentially training you to be a deeply moral, incredibly charming, unshakable diplomat in the drawing room.
Exactly.
But then I turn the page to part 2, and I feel like I've suddenly stumbled into a survivalist handbook mixed with, like, an industrial chemistry textbook.
It is a massive shift. The pivot is so jarring.
It really is. We go from how to be modest straight into hyper-practical, hands-on science.
Yeah, part 2 just abandons the drawing room entirely. It gives highly technical instructions on making jellies and sweetmeats, brewing foreign wines, dyeing fabrics, and taking out complex stains.
And it even teaches you how to cement broken glass, china, or metal, which I have to highlight that specific detail. Why on earth is an etiquette book teaching a woman how to cement broken glass?
Well, think about the economic reality before the Industrial Revolution. A pane of glass, a fine china bowl, or a metal tool wasn't something you could easily replace by just running out to a big box store.
Right, you couldn't just Amazon Prime a new window.
Exactly. These items were imported, they were artisan-made, and they were insanely expensive.
Yeah.
A broken window or a cracked serving dish was basically a miniature financial crisis for a household.
Oh, I see.
So knowing the chemical composition of a bonding agent to fix that glass wasn't just some cute DIY hobby. It was a crucial line of economic defense.
That reframes things completely, and it goes even further than that. The manual includes physical and chirurgical receipts, which is basically 18th century terminology for medical and surgical recipes.
Right.
So you have to be the diplomat, the chemist, the mechanic, and the resident surgeon.
Which tells us something really profound about how the 18th century mind viewed usefulness. There was absolutely no separation between spiritual goodness and practical, gritty utility.
They were just one and the same.
Completely. True usefulness meant being the spiritual anchor of the family while simultaneously acting as the master manager of the home's physical and economic reality.
I think this is where the modern listener might have a huge aha moment. Because we tend to look at these old manuals and think, oh, look at these oppressive rules forcing women to do chores.
Right. We view it as subjugation.
Yeah, exactly. But in a time period when women had virtually no legal rights, no right to own property, and no financial independence, becoming hyper-competent in these specific domains was kind of their only culturally sanctioned path to wielding actual power.
That is a brilliant way to look at it.
I mean, if you are the only one who knows how to perform surgery, fix the physical assets, and manage the entire household economy, you are indispensable. This isn't just a chore list. It's covert empowerment wrapped in the guise of domestic duty.
That is the exact right way to read this. In fact, the manual's preface explicitly states its goal is to make women independent managers so they don't have to hire outside help. It was entirely about controlling the wealth and resources of the estate.
Okay, but that raises a massive logistical question for me. Knowing what these women were supposed to master is one thing. But how on earth do you actually train a human being to handle that intense combination of theology, diplomacy, and surgical chemistry?
Yeah, the training process was intense. And to understand it, we need to fast forward to our second source.
Right, the 1821 text, the female instructor or young woman's friend and companion.
Yes. So this manual shifts our focus to the pedagogy of piety. How do you actually make these immense moral and practical lessons stick? And the very first rule it lays down is all about timing.
Timing, okay, like time of day or age.
Age, initially. Education must happen extremely early.
Yeah.
The author uses this striking phrasing, arguing you must strike when the heart is flexible, the temper ductile, and the conscience tender.
Ductile meaning moldable, right, like before society hardens them into set ways.
Precisely. And because of that plasticity, the text is also militant about when, during the day, religious instruction should happen. You don't just squeeze it in when you find a spare moment.
Right, it can't be an afterthought.
Exactly. You must use the best part of the day, which the manual identifies as the early morning, before the child's mind is fatigued by the world.
That makes sense.
The core philosophy here is that religion cannot be an occasional act. The manual actually calls it an indwelling principle.
Yeah, and it makes a really fascinating comparison there. It says, practical religion should influence your conduct the exact same way external grace influences physical manners.
Oh, that's a great metaphor.
Right. Like, a truly graceful person doesn't have to consciously think about being graceful. It's just a spirit diffused through their entire nervous system that animates every single movement.
And to reach that incredibly high bar of automatic, internalized grace, the manual breaks down the actual mechanics of prayer for young learners into a highly specific taxonomy.
Okay, lay it out for us.
It lists adoration, self-dedication, confession, petition, thanksgiving, which, by the way, it stresses must include a specific, itemized recap of daily mercies, and finally, intercession.
Wait, I have to stop you there.
Sure, what is it?
Because as a modern reader, if I see a manual telling teachers to enforce a highly structured, categorized theological checklist on a child whose mind is, flexible and ductile, my alarm bells go off.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, isn't this just rote memorization? Are they just forcing kids to blindly recite the Lord's Prayer over and over until they've memorized the syllables without comprehending a single word?
That is the natural assumption, right? And honestly, it's a trap many historical educators fell into. But this 1821 text explicitly warns against that exact danger.
Really? It calls that out?
Yes. It tells the reader that making a child commit forms to memory, like mindlessly copying verses, produces zero effect on their character.
So how do they avoid creating mindless theological robots?
The text advises teaching a concept like the Lord's Prayer sentence by agonizing sentence. The teacher literally cannot move on until the child can verbally explain the logical relationship and dependence of every single part.
Wow, that's incredibly thorough.
It is. But the real mechanism they use, and I think this is brilliant, is mimicking the teaching methods of Christ by using the immediate physical environment.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
Well, they used nature to make abstract theology tangible. But they wouldn't just point and say, look at that pretty bird, God made it. They would use the environment for complex analogical reasoning.
So taking something physical and making it a metaphor.
Exactly. A teacher might point to a bird meticulously weaving a nest to prepare for winter, and used that to explain how a young woman must meticulously weave her daily spiritual habits to protect her family's soul from the inevitable storms of life.
That's beautiful,
They
actually.
use the harvest, the sky, the beasts of the field to deduce moral instruction.
That is totally different from rote memorization. They are actually teaching these young girls how to observe an ordinary fact in their environment, extract a metaphor, and then apply it to an abstract ethical framework.
Yes, it's an early, rigorous form of critical thinking applied to theology. It trains the mind to constantly ask why and how, rather than just accepting what.
Okay, so we've established the intense syllabus of 1704 and this highly analytical, nature-based teaching method from 1821, but I really want to see the finished product.
The ideal woman.
Yes. When a young woman is actually walking this path, who is her ultimate role model? Because this 1821 manual gives the listeners specific historical case studies of women who actually pulled this off.
And the choices the author makes are incredibly revealing. The first major influencer the text holds up is Mary, Queen of Great Britain. So Mary II, who was born in 1662 and married William of Orange.
What specifically made her the gold standard for them?
The text highlights her unaffected piety, which means her faith wasn't performative or done for an audience. It was deeply, quietly genuine.
Right.
It also praises her immense gentleness, noting her husband claims she never committed a single indiscretion in their 17 years of marriage.
17 years without a single public or private misstep is terrifyingly perfect. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. But if she was just gentle and compliant, she wouldn't be on this list, right?
No, she definitely wouldn't. The real reason Mary II is the ultimate model is because she possessed what the manual calls intellectual firmness.
Intellectual firmness. I love that.
It's a great term. And the defining anecdote they use to prove this is her conflict with her own father, King James II.
Okay, let's set the stakes for that, because this isn't just a daughter having a disagreement with her dad over dinner. King James II was a monarch who openly professed the Roman Catholic religion, and Mary had been educated in the principles of the Protestant Reformation.
All right, so the stakes were astronomical. Defying a monarch on religion in the 1680s flirted with treason and heresy. James II applied immense pressure on Mary to convert to Catholicism.
And what did she do?
Well, Mary didn't just passively refuse. She didn't just lower her eyes and say, "Oh, I'd rather not." She wrote her father a highly learned, aggressively solid letter where she actively confuted his scholars' arguments point by point.
Are you serious? She debated a king.
And she won. The text quotes Bishop Burnet, who was absolutely shocked that a young woman could write with such profound theological command completely on her own. She proved she understood the complex mechanics of her religion just as deeply as she loved it.
That is a staggering level of competence. She is taking that critical thinking she learned from observing the birds in the harvest and applying it to outmaneuver a monarch's theological advisors.
Exactly.
And she's not the only powerhouse they highlight either. They also hold up Lady Jane Grey.
Yes, Lady Jane Grey is praised for her modesty, her affability, and a truly intense love of learning. I mean, she mastered Latin, Greek, French, and Italian.
The anecdote the book shares about her is one of my absolute favorites in history.
Oh, hunting party one.
Yes, so she is at her family's massive estate, Broadgate. The entire nobility, her whole family, is outside engaging in this chaotic, loud hunting party in the park. It's the social event of the season.
Everyone who is anyone is out there.
Right. And her tutor, Roger Ascham, comes looking for her. And where is she? She's sitting inside, entirely alone, reading the ancient Greek philosopher Plato.
And not for an assignment.
Yeah.
Just for her own sheer enjoyment.
Yes. When Ascham asks her why she isn't outside partying and hunting with the rest of the elite, she tells him that the fleeting sport they are having out there is absolutely nothing compared to the profound pleasure she gets from reading Plato.
It's so good.
Listener, this is exactly like that teenager at a loud, chaotic high school party who locks herself in the host's home office to read an advanced astrophysics textbook just for fun.
It is the perfect image of intellectual autonomy.
Yeah.
And it synthesizes the core message of these role models perfectly. The path to usefulness was never about grooming women to be quiet, passive participants in their own lives.
Far from it.
Right, it was about fusing required social gentleness with undeniable sheer intellectual horsepower. Standing your ground against a king with a flawless theological defense, or reading ancient Greek for fun while the world parties outside, that was the aesthetic of a truly useful mind.
Which brings us to a really dangerous variable, I think.
How so?
Well, if you successfully follow this curriculum, you have just created a highly educated, deeply analytical, intellectually firm woman who knows exactly how to control the household economy.
Very true.
So how did society prevent these powerhouses from completely disrupting the male-dominated social order? They had to build an incredibly rigid external framework to contain and direct them out in the public sphere.
And that leads us perfectly to the final source in our stack, the 1833 text, the Gentleman and Lady's Book of Politeness and Propriety of Deportment.
Just looking at the table of contents here, the social world is exhaustively structured. I mean, politeness isn't just a general attitude of being kind. It is heavily compartmentalized by profession and rank.
Oh, it leaves absolutely nothing to intuition. There are distinct, heavily enforced protocols for how you interact with a shopkeeper versus how you speak to a customer.
Wow.
Yeah, there are entirely separate rules for dealing with lawyers, physicians, military men, artists, and ecclesiastics.
And it dictates your physical body, too. There are strict guidelines for gestures, exact pronunciation, and a massive section on what it calls the talent of listening to others.
Which is a lost art, frankly.
Completely. And it outlines your exact duties toward the unfortunate, the sick, and how to flawlessly execute a funeral.
It covers every conceivable social interaction.
It does. But listener, I have to act as your surrogate here because I know what you're thinking. This sounds utterly exhausting.
It sounds like a full-time job.
Right. Is a hyper-specific etiquette book telling you how to talk to a lawyer versus a shopkeeper really about being a useful, empathetic person? Or is this just a cynical tool for maintaining very strict class boundaries and protecting the social hierarchy from these highly educated women?
Well, it's a debate historians have constantly. There's zero doubt that this text enforces a rigid social hierarchy. You are literally coding your behavior based on someone's class and profession.
So it is exclusionary.
Yes, but we have to look at the mechanism of etiquette in 1833. In the context of the path to usefulness, politeness wasn't just about showing off. It was the ultimate social application of that usefulness.
Okay, but what was the actual mechanism, though? How did it function on a practical level?
Think of this 1833 manual as the UI/UX design, the user interface software, for a highly volatile, rapidly changing society.
Oh, that's an interesting way to frame it.
Right. If a military man, a wealthy widow, and a shopkeeper interact without exact rules of engagement, the system crashes into class conflict, offense, and chaos. This etiquette book is the software that keeps the societal machine from catching fire.
So it's essentially the ultimate social lubrication.
Exactly. Good pronunciation, attentive listening, knowing the exact physical gestures to use at a funeral. These are practical tools to reduce friction. If a woman could navigate every single one of those complex interactions flawlessly, she was bringing harmony and stability to the public sphere, just as she brought economic order to her domestic sphere.
It is a staggering amount of pressure when you zoom out and look at the whole picture. I mean, listener, look at the journey we've taken through your sources today. We started in 1704, and I think we have completely dismantled that weak cinematic stereotype of the fainting historical lady.
We really have. We've uncovered a demanding, holistic integration of a person's entire existence.
Yeah.
The historical path to usefulness required the critical thinking to understand complex theology, the domestic genius to literally run a miniature economy and perform medical care, and the social software to interact flawlessly with everyone from a local baker to a demanding monarch.
It was covert empowerment. It was women using the only avenues available to them, faith, home, and manners, to become entirely indispensable forces of nature.
It's incredibly inspiring. And actually, that leaves us with a truly provocative thought to take away from this deep dive.
Oh, what's that?
Well, think about how we live today. We heavily, almost obsessively compartmentalize our lives. We have our professional skills in one box, our household chores in a completely different box, and our moral or spiritual values in yet another.
Right, we have our work selves, our home selves, and our weekend selves.
Exactly. And we rarely let them bleed into one another. But what if we view them all as a single, unified path to usefulness, just as the women reading these historical manuals did?
Oh, wow.
What if there was no distinction between the intellectual rigor you bring to your career and the care you put into fixing something broken in your kitchen? How would treating your morning routine, your interactions at the grocery store, and your personal quiet time as one interconnected, unified discipline change the way you actually live your life tomorrow?
That is a phenomenal question to leave off on. If we approach the mundane with that same level of holistic intention, suddenly every action is part of a much bigger, much more powerful picture.
It changes everything.
It really does. Thank you so much to our listener for providing this incredible stack of sources. You gave us
Sure.
the keys to unlock a whole new appreciation for what it meant to walk that intense, grueling, and ultimately powerful path to usefulness. We will see you next time on The Deep Dive.